Dawn of the Dead begins with Anna's character, played by Sarah Polley, having to adapt quickly with the fact that a zombie apocalypse has begun. You know what we haven't seen a lot of? Zombies. While escaping the carnage, she meets a band of other survivors, who all in agreement come to the conclusion that the best bet they have to survive is to go to the nearest mall. Let's all go to a mall. Glass windows, lots of population. The group is faced with many problems once they begin to settle in, most of which derive from human contact, not zombies, which in my books is a plus. However, all the characters have the same goal, and that's survival. And, well, we've seen that a million times. No offense to Zack Snyder or anything, but when he makes a movie, the story isn't usually the selling point. If there's one thing we can say about Snyder, is that his films are beautiful. Take anything he's made, for example, Man of Steel, Sucker Punch even was amazing to look at. And we could see that when he made Dawn of the Dead. He gave us our first glimpse of what was to come through his career. And in a sense, it was exciting. Oh my god. The direction is one half of the story, and Snyder is at fault. Some would say that he purposely made the movie cheesy, and that personally takes me out. An example of this cheesiness would easily be the characters. They were the most boring characters I've ever seen in a movie. Dawn of the Dead's characters are so cliche. The badass black cop, the emotional guy who gets with the girl, the dumb hit. All of these characters are one-dimensional, and it really affects the experience with me. The only character who was a little bit original was Anna, Sarah Polley's character. She was the most boring of all. In an alternate universe, we can imagine I had the choice of watching her on screen again, or stabbing myself in the eye with a rusty blade. In that alternate universe, I'm blind. However, for all of its faults, Dawn of the Dead does get exciting when it needs to be. All of the zombie scenes are awesome. Gore, action, Snyder excels. However, the plot was so cliche. Zombies start destroying a small town. Main character runs for their life, meets up with another group of survivors, and then they bunker down and survive. I will forgive them for one reason. This is a reboot, and they didn't want to stray too far from the original movie. But at the same time, I do have to take marks off Snyder, because when you reboot, you have two choices. Stick with the same, or focus on the story. One of them should easily be the top priority. A story is only as good as a cast presents it. With what the actors had to work with, they didn't do that bad of a job. Not saying they were good, most of them were mediocre. No one really stood out to me except two characters. First, let's talk about Kenneth, played by Ving Rhames. Badass black cop. But I'm not saying he was good. The only reason his character was good was because he took cheesy to a whole nother level. The other character that really stood out to me was Steve, played by Ty Burrell. As you all know, Ty Burrell is actually a pretty good actor. I always found it funny watching him act with the other actors. You knew he had to act with them as if they were idiots, but I think he was just watching their acting and just expressing how he really felt. He made me hate him, and that's what the character was meant for me to hate him, to disagree with everything he believed. And I did. He was the only character who actually seemed real. Everybody else seemed like cartoon characters. He felt like a real character inside of a cartoon. Another fault with the cast was it was way too big. Characters did not get enough screen time, and therefore we didn't get enough time to flesh them out. When a character died, I just didn't care. Take 28 Days Later, for example. One of the main characters died in that film, and I was heartbroken. Why? Because there's a small cast, and each character gets enough screen time to make me care. But with Dawn of the Dead, there's too much. I won't talk about who dies, exactly, but there is supposed to be an emotional death in Dawn of the Dead. And I didn't give a fuck. Thank God, a character's dead. Maybe I can focus on some of the other ones now. Snyder may not have presented the story or the cast well. However, when it comes to the presentation of the film, really, really well done. If there's one thing Snyder can do, he can make one beautiful piece of art. Visually, it doesn't get better than Snyder's movies in my opinion. He's like Tim Burton, only good. If you want to argue the point that Snyder is amazing with visuals, watch any of his films. 300, Sucker Punch, Man of Steel, all of these movies are visually stunning. You can tell Snyder really focused on the gore in this film. Heads blowing off, chainsaws ripping through torsos. On the other hand, the explosions in this movie, not so good. In Dawn of the Dead, the tone is amazing. The movie starts off bright and colorful, but slowly, as the movie progresses, it gets darker and darker. This shows that the world is losing its life. Another thing to take note of is the zombies. As the days get darker and darker, they slowly start to rot and decay more. It really, really pulls you in. Another thing Snyder did well was choose music. Personally, I'm not a really big fan of taking songs that aren't orchestrated for movies. I personally would have preferred an orchestra in Dawn of the Dead. Otherwise, it takes out the emotion. Although, Snyder did choose some pretty good choices for not using an orchestra. However, nothing really grasps me like John Williams or Hans Zimmer. The Blu-ray quality is kind of mediocre. It looks somewhat like a low-budget film, but it's good for what it is. The audio is superb. Put simply, Dawn of the Dead is fun and visually stunning. Unfortunately, that's about it. It never really achieves what it sets out to. If you're going in expecting a good drama with a great story, you're going to be really disappointed. If you think you're going to get scared, think again. However, if you do like cheesy, gory, action-packed flicks, then this is the one for you. Personally, my opinion of this film is right down the middle. Ultimately, I'm left with no other choice than to give Dawn of the Dead a 5 out of 10. Whether you love Dawn of the Dead or you hated it, I want to see your comments. This is Zack, coming to you from Battlefront Productions. See you soon.